Most of us don't listen. We wait to reply. We defend. We perform. And in the silence we avoid, whole relationships fall apart. Psychologist Carl Rogers observed that when someone truly listens without judgment, it feels like being understood and not found wanting. Philosopher Simone Weil wrote that attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. In Buddhist traditions, mindfulness is described as deep listening, hearing with full presence of body and mind. In African philosophy, Ubuntu teaches, "I am because we are." To listen is not only to honor another, but to affirm the bond that makes us human. Listening isn't passive, it's love in practice. And in a world drowning in noise, it may be the most revolutionary act you can perform. The moment everything changed. A teenager sits on the edge of their bed, hands trembling slightly. They've rehearsed these words 100 times. Finally, they gather the courage to say, "Mum, I don't think I'm okay." The words hang in the air like smoke. For a moment, the mother's world stops. She sees her child, really sees them, pale, thin, withdrawn in ways she's been trying not to notice. The bags under their eyes, the way they've been eating less, sleeping more, disappearing into their room for hours. Warning signs she's filed away under teenage phase, because acknowledging them felt too terrifying. Now those 3 words land like stones in still water, sending ripples through every assumption she's held about her child's well-being. The mother feels her chest tighten. Her heart begins to race. Terror floods through her, not of her child's words, but of what they might reveal. The carefully constructed narrative that everything is fine begins to crumble. If her child isn't okay, what does that say about her as a mother? What darkness might be lurking beneath the surface of their family life? Her nervous system kicks into overdrive. Fight, flight, or freeze. And she chooses fight. Not against her child, but against the reality trying to surface. She rushes in with solutions, like a medic applying bandages to a wound she can't bear to see. "You're just stressed." "School is tough these days, I know." "Maybe you need more sleep." "When did you go to bed last night?" "Have you been eating enough?" "I noticed you barely touched dinner." "You know what? Let's make an appointment with Dr. Martinez for a physical." "You'll be fine, honey. You're strong. You've always been strong." The words tumble out in a desperate cascade, each one pushing her child's reality further away. She's not malicious. She's drowning in her own fear, reaching for any lifeline that might restore the familiar world where her child is simply tired, not broken. The teenager watches their mother's face transform from concern to panic to desperate optimism. They see her eyes darting around the room, landing anywhere but on their face. They recognize the telltale signs of an adult who cannot sit with difficult truths. They've seen it before, in teachers who change the subject when they mention feeling hopeless, in friends who immediately crack jokes when conversations get too real. Something dies in their eyes, not dramatically, but quietly, like a candle being snuffed out. Their face goes blank, not angry, just empty. The expression teenagers perfect when they realize the adult world isn't safe for their authentic selves. They nod slowly, mechanically. "Yeah, maybe you're right. I'm probably just tired." But inside, they're retreating like a snail pulling into its shell. The words they desperately needed to say, about the crushing weight in their chest that makes it hard to breathe, about feeling invisible even in crowded rooms, about nights spent staring at the ceiling wondering if anyone would notice if they disappeared. Those words vanish back into the dark corners of their mind. The chance is gone, and they instinctively know it won't come again. The mother feels relief wash over her, crisis averted, the familiar world restored. She doesn't notice the way her child's shoulders slump, or how they avoid eye contact as they mumble something about homework and disappear back into their room. This scene plays out millions of times every day, and homes, marriages, boardrooms, and coffee shops. We think we're helping by speaking, by fixing, by filling the terrifying space of another person's pain. But often, what people need most is not our wisdom, it's our ears. Not our solutions, it's our presence. The tragedy isn't that the mother doesn't love her child. She loves them desperately. The tragedy is that her own unprocessed fear made her incapable of receiving what her child was offering. Their trust, their vulnerability, their truth.
The great listening illusion. Here's the paradox that haunts modern communication. Almost everyone believes they're great listeners. In surveys, over 80% of people rate their listening skills as above average, a statistical impossibility that reveals our profound self-deception. But communication research consistently finds a vast gap between perception and reality. We confuse hearing with listening, silence with receptivity, physical presence with emotional availability. Think about your last difficult conversation. Your friend, partner, or colleague said something that stung. Perhaps they criticized your work, questioned your judgment, or expressed disappointment in something you did. In that moment, did you sink deeper into curiosity about their experience, or did you leap into defense mode? If you're human, your brain likely defaulted to what psychologists call autobiographical listening. Everything gets filtered through your own experience, needs, and self-protection instincts. Instead of wondering what pain or fear might be driving their words, you began composing rebuttals. That's not fair. They don't understand the full situation. Wait until they hear my side of the story. You were there physically, nodding at the right moments, maintaining eye contact, but your attention had left the building. You were no longer listening to them. You were listening to your own internal narrator, building your case, planning your counter-argument. Neuroscience helps explain this listening hijack. When we feel threatened, and criticism, conflict, or intense emotion often registers as threat, the amygdala fires up, flooding the system with stress chemicals. Meanwhile, your default mode network, the brain system tied to self-referential thought and autobiographical processing, kicks into overdrive. This network evolved to help our ancestors scan for threats and opportunities, constantly asking, "How does this affect me? What do I need to do to stay safe?" It's a survival mechanism that served us well on the savannah, but creates havoc in relationships. Instead of staying present with another person's experience, we get pulled into our own mental theater, where we're simultaneously the protagonist, director, and critic. So when your partner says, "I feel alone in this relationship," you don't hear their ache, their longing for connection, their vulnerable admission of pain. Your threatened nervous system hears an attack on your character, a criticism of your efforts, an accusation that you're failing as a partner. You defend yourself. "But I'm home every night. I just got you flowers last week. What about that vacation I planned?" The conversation derails, not because you didn't hear the words, but because you didn't listen to the human being behind them. You heard the content, but missed the emotion. You processed the complaint, but ignored the invitation for deeper intimacy. This phenomenon is so pervasive that relationship researcher John Gottman's lab work shows he can often predict relationship outcomes by how couples respond during conflict, especially whether they make each other feel heard and repair after ruptures. It's not whether they fight, it's whether they can receive each other's reality without immediately defending, counterattacking, or stonewalling. We've become a species of simultaneous broadcasters, each transmitting on our own frequency while wondering why no one seems to be tuning in.
The result is an epidemic of loneliness, a public health concern, often compared in impact to smoking in summaries of social isolation research. People surrounded by others, yet feeling profoundly unknown and unseen.
The neuroscience of being truly heard. What happens in the brain and body when someone feels genuinely heard represents one of the most profound shifts in human neurobiology. It's not just a nice feeling. It's a fundamental reorganization of the nervous system, from threat to safety, from defense to openness. When we feel unheard or misunderstood, the autonomic nervous system activates what polyvagal theory describes as a sympathetic fight or flight state. Stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline flood the bloodstream. Heart rate increases, breathing becomes shallow, muscles tense for action. The prefrontal cortex, our center for complex thinking and emotional regulation, goes offline. Blood flow redirects to large muscle groups needed for survival. In this state, we're literally incapable of the higher-order thinking required for intimacy, creativity, or problem-solving. We become reactive, defensive, and narrow in our perception. The world shrinks to threats and solutions. But when someone truly listens, when they offer what researchers call attuned attention, the entire system shifts. UCLA neuroscientist Dan Siegel's brain imaging studies show that empathic listening activates the social engagement system, triggering a cascade of neurobiological changes. First, the vagus nerve, that crucial pathway connecting brain to body, shifts into what polyvagal theory describes as parasympathetic mode. This is what Stephen Porges calls the social engagement system, our biological capacity for connection and calm. Heart rate variability improves, indicating a flexible, resilient nervous system. Breathing deepens and slows. Facial muscles soften. The defensive armoring begins to melt. At the cellular level, the brain's mirroring systems engage, and speaker-listener neural coupling can be observed, patterns that align when two people connect. This isn't just metaphorical. fMRI scans show overlapping activation patterns between speaker and empathic listener, suggesting genuine understanding at the neural level. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex comes back online. This is crucial because the prefrontal cortex houses our capacity for self-reflection, emotional regulation, and what psychologists call mentalization, the ability to understand that other people have internal experiences different from our own. When someone feels heard, they regain access to their own complexity and nuance. Perhaps most remarkably, being truly heard appears to reduce activity in the amygdala, the brain's alarm system. UCLA researcher Matthew Lieberman found that when people feel understood, the amygdala calms down, even when discussing painful or threatening topics. It's as if empathic listening creates a neurobiological safety net that allows people to explore their own difficult emotions without being overwhelmed by them. The biochemical changes are equally profound. Cortisol levels drop. Affiliative chemistry, such as oxytocin, may increase, supporting feelings of safety and connection. Dopamine pathways associated with reward and motivation activate. The immune system, which suffers under chronic stress, begins to recover its full function. In relationships, psychologist John Gottman found that couples who thrive don't necessarily fight less than those who divorce. They repair more effectively, and repair begins with feeling heard. When both partners feel their experience has been received and acknowledged, even without agreement or solution, their nervous systems can return to baseline. From this calm state, creativity and compromise become possible. In workplace settings, Google's Project Aristotle, a massive study of team effectiveness, found that psychological safety was the strongest predictor of high performance. And psychological safety, at its core, is the confidence that you can speak your truth without fear of judgment or retaliation. It's knowing that your voice matters, that your perspective has value, that someone is listening.
The 4 killers of deep listening. 1. The noise of ego. Sarah sits across from her best friend Maria, who's describing the devastating breakup that ended her 5-year relationship. But Sarah isn't really there. As Maria talks about feeling blindsided and heartbroken, Sarah's mind drifts to her own recent dating struggles, her own fears about commitment, her own theories about what went wrong in Maria's relationship. "You know what your problem is?" Sarah interrupts. "You're too giving. You need to play harder to get. That's what I learned with David." Maria's face closes off. The moment of vulnerability evaporates. Sarah's ego has hijacked the conversation, transforming Maria's pain into material for Sarah's own narrative. This is autobiographical listening. Everything filtered through the lens of, how does this relate to me? The ego is a masterful hijacker. It can take any story, any confession, any moment of vulnerability, and make it about us. We compare. "At least you had 5 years. I can't even get past 3 months." We compete. "Your breakup sounds hard, but wait until you hear about." We counsel based on our own experience. "Here's what worked for me." Neuroscientists call this the self-referential processing network. When activated, it literally prevents us from accessing the neural pathways required for empathy and perspective taking. We become trapped in our own subjective bubble, unable to step into another person's reality. The antidote requires what Buddhists call ego death, not literal death, but the temporary dissolution of self-concern. It means asking, can I set aside my own experience long enough to truly enter theirs? Can I let go of being the expert, the advice giver, the center of attention? 2. The advice addiction. Western culture has trained us to equate caring with solving. When someone shares a problem, our reflexive response is to fix it. This seems logical, even loving. Surely helping someone solve their problem is better than just sitting there. But therapy research suggests healing often comes not from solutions, but from feeling understood. Carl Rogers discovered this accidentally in the 1940s. As a young therapist, he was trained in the directive approach: diagnose the problem, prescribe the solution. But he noticed that clients improved most in sessions where he said very little, where he simply reflected back what he heard without trying to change anything. This led to his revolutionary insight. People don't need us to fix them because they're not broken. They need us to believe in their capacity to find their own way forward. Consider Tom, a middle manager struggling with workplace stress. He confides in his wife, "I feel like I'm drowning at work. Everyone needs something from me, and I never feel like I'm doing anything well." The advice response. Have you talked to your boss about redistributing responsibilities? Maybe you need to set better boundaries. What about that time management app I sent you? The listening response. It sounds like you're carrying a tremendous load. What's it like to feel pulled in so many directions? The advice response, however well-intentioned, subtly communicates, your feelings are a problem to be solved. The listening response communicates, your feelings make sense, and I'm here to understand them with you. This doesn't mean advice is never appropriate, but research shows it's helpful only after people feel truly heard. When we rush to solutions, we often skip the crucial step of helping people clarify what they're actually experiencing. 3. The terror of silence. We live in the age of continuous noise. Phones buzz with notifications every 11 minutes. Podcasts fill our commutes. Music soundtracks our workouts. Even restaurants pipe in ambient noise to keep us comfortable. We've trained ourselves to be afraid of quiet. This terror of silence devastates our listening. The moment a pause emerges in conversation, we rush to fill it. But psychotherapy research suggests that silence is often where integration happens, where people process what they've said, connect disparate thoughts, or access deeper truths. Writer and tech researcher Linda Stone coined the term continuous partial attention, and studies led by Gloria Mark at UC Irvine find that knowledge workers switch tasks about every 11 minutes and take roughly 20+ minutes to refocus. We're always somewhat distracted, always ready to shift focus, always uncomfortable with the slow, spacious rhythm that deep listening requires. The fear runs deeper than mere discomfort. Silence forces us to confront the present moment without distraction. In quiet, difficult emotions surface. Uncertainty becomes palpable. The carefully maintained illusion that we're in control of our inner experience begins to crack. But this is precisely what makes silence sacred. Buddhist teachers call it interbeing silence, the space where the artificial boundaries between self and other begin to dissolve. In group therapy, clients often report that the most healing moments happen not when the therapist is speaking, but in the pregnant pauses where truth settles into the room. Learning to sit with silence is learning to trust the natural rhythms of human communication. Not every moment needs words. Sometimes the most profound connection happens in wordless presence. 4. The distraction epidemic. Research from UC Irvine suggests that the average knowledge worker switches tasks frequently throughout the day, taking significant time to fully refocus. This constant task switching doesn't just fragment our work, it fragments our capacity for sustained attention to other human beings. True listening requires what psychologist William James called sustained, selective attention. The ability to focus on one thing while filtering out irrelevant stimuli. But our devices have trained us for the opposite, scattered, reactive attention that jumps from stimulus to stimulus. Watch people in restaurants, waiting rooms, or even during conversations. Eyes flick to phones, fingers fidget with devices. Even when screens are put away, the muscle memory remains. The itch to check, to update, to escape into digital distraction. This isn't moral failing, it's neuroplasticity in action. We've literally rewired our brains for distraction. The neural pathways for sustained attention have weakened from disuse, while the pathways for rapid task switching have strengthened through constant practice. The cost to relationships is profound. When we're in continuous, partial attention mode, people sense it immediately. They can tell when we're physically present but mentally elsewhere. Children especially are exquisitely attuned to this. They know the difference between a parent who's actually listening and one who's going through the motions while their mind is elsewhere. The architecture of deep listening. MIT researcher Otto Scharmer spent decades studying how people attend to each other and identified 4 distinct levels of listening, each representing a deeper quality of presence. Level 1. Downloading. This is listening from inside your existing mental models and assumptions. You hear only what confirms what you already know or believe. It's like having a pre-recorded script in your head. Regardless of what the other person says, you respond from your established patterns. A teenager says, "School is really stressing me out." Downloading response,
You just need to work harder. When I was your age, the listener never actually receives the teenager's current reality because they're operating from their own historical experience of school stress. Level 2. Factual listening. Here, you notice when new information contradicts your assumptions and you adjust accordingly. This is the realm of debate, data exchange, and intellectual discussion. You're listening for facts, figures, and logical arguments, but remaining emotionally detached. The teenager says, "School is really stressing me out." Factual response. What specific subjects are giving you the most trouble? How many hours are you studying each night? Better than downloading, but still missing the emotional reality beneath the facts. Level 3. Empathic listening. Now you begin to see the situation through the other person's eyes. You tune into their emotional state, their values, their internal experience. You temporarily set aside your own frame of reference and genuinely try to understand theirs. The teenager says, "School is really stressing me out." Empathic response. It sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed. What's that stress like for you day to day? This level creates safety and connection. The person feels seen and understood. Level 4. Generative listening. This is listening from the future that wants to emerge. You're so present, so free from agenda, that new possibilities can arise through the conversation itself. Both people discover things they didn't know they knew. The conversation becomes a creative space where fresh insights emerge. The teenager says, "School is really stressing me out." Generative response might begin empathically, but then creates space for new awareness. What do you find yourself dreaming about when you imagine life beyond all this stress? At this level, listening becomes a collaborative exploration of what's possible, not just what's problematic. Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh described this deepest level as listening to relieve suffering. He taught that when we listen with complete presence and without judgment, we create conditions for healing that transcend any specific advice or solution. Practical tools for deep listening. The stop method. S. Silence your inner narrator. The voice in your head has opinions about everything. It judges, analyzes, prepares responses, and makes assumptions. Before you can truly listen to another person, you need to notice this internal chatter and gently set it aside. Practice. Take 3 conscious breaths before entering any important conversation. Use these breaths to transition from whatever you are doing to being fully present with this person. T. Turn full attention outward. Physical attention precedes emotional attention. Turn your body toward the person speaking. Make appropriate eye contact. Put away devices. Notice your own impulse to multitask and choose presence instead. Practice. The 20-20-20 rule. For the first 20 seconds of any conversation, focus solely on being present. Look at the person's face for 20 seconds without planning what you'll say next. O. Open without judgment. This is the hardest part. Opening means being willing to have your mind changed, to be surprised, to discover that this person's reality is different from what you assumed. It means suspending the need to be right, to fix, or to have the answers. Practice. Begin conversations with curiosity rather than certainty. Replace "I think you should" with "Help me understand." P. Pause before replying.
The pause is sacred space. It allows the other person's words to land fully before you respond. It gives you time to choose your response, rather than react automatically. Practice. Count to 3 before speaking. In that pause, ask yourself, what did I just hear? What does this person most need right now? The 3-breath rule. Borrowed from mindfulness practice, this simple tool can transform conversations. When someone says something that triggers your defensiveness, criticism, or advice-giving impulse, take 3 slow, conscious breaths before responding. Breath 1. Notice your emotional reaction without judgment. Breath 2. Return attention to the other person. Breath 3. Choose your response from a calm, centered place. Research shows that emotional reactions typically peak and begin to subside within 90 seconds if we don't fuel them with additional thoughts. 3 breaths gives that initial wave of reactivity time to pass. Reflection practice. This involves simply reflecting back what you've heard, both the content and the emotion. It sounds deceptively simple, but it's incredibly powerful because it communicates that you've actually received what they've shared. It sounds like you're feeling. What I'm hearing is, let me make sure I understand. The key is reflecting not just the facts, but the feelings. Often people don't fully understand their own emotional experience until someone mirrors it back to them. The power of curious questions. Instead of offering advice or sharing your own experience, ask questions that invite the person to go deeper into their own understanding. What's that like for you? How do you make sense of that? What matters most to you about this situation? What would it look like if this were resolved? Notice that these questions don't push the person toward any particular solution. They create space for the person to discover their own insight. Sacred pause practice. This is about learning to trust silence, to resist the urge to fill every quiet moment with words. When someone finishes speaking, count to 3 before responding. Often, they'll continue talking and share something even more important. Many people need time to access their deeper thoughts and feelings. If you jump in too quickly, you may cut off the very thing they most needed to say.
Listening across cultures. Ancient wisdom for modern connection. While Western psychology has recently discovered the healing power of deep listening, many cultures have practiced it for millennia. Indigenous traditions around the world offer profound teachings about the art of presence and attention. In many indigenous council traditions, a talking piece is passed, so one voice is heard at a time, while others offer full attention. Wisdom emerges only after every voice is received. The talking stick tradition ensures that only one person speaks at a time, while others listen with full attention. But the deeper teaching is about listening to the silence between words, to the spirit behind the speech, to the collective wisdom that emerges when individual egos step aside. African Ubuntu philosophy teaches that I am because we are. Our very humanity is constituted through relationship and recognition. True listening, in this context, isn't just being polite or gathering information. It's an act of mutual creation, where both listener and speaker become more fully themselves through the exchange. In Japanese culture, the concept of ma, the pregnant pause or meaningful silence, is considered as important as spoken words. Master listeners learn to appreciate these spaces, understanding that often the most important communication happens in what's not said. Sufi traditions speak of listening with the ear of the heart, sama, where the listener's entire being becomes receptive to not just words, but to the divine speaking through human encounter. The 13th century poet Rumi wrote extensively about this quality of attention that transforms both listener and speaker. These traditions share several common insights. Listening is sacred work. Silence is as important as speech. True listening transforms both people involved, and the quality of our attention affects the quality of what emerges in relationship. The shadow side of deep listening. Learning to listen deeply isn't all beautiful transformation and healing moments. It comes with costs that our culture rarely discusses, shadow elements that every developing listener must navigate. The mirror effect. When you truly listen to someone's pain, fear, or confusion, it often reflects your own unprocessed material back at you. A friend's description of feeling invisible in their marriage might trigger your own fears about intimacy. A colleague's anxiety about their performance might mirror your own perfectionist struggles. This is why many people unconsciously avoid deep listening. It forces us to confront aspects of our own experience we'd rather keep buried. The person sharing becomes an unwitting mirror, showing us parts of ourselves we're not ready to see. Professional therapists spend years learning to sit with this phenomenon, to notice when their own material is being activated without projecting it onto their clients. For the rest of us, it requires developing what psychologists call emotional differentiation, the ability to feel empathy without losing ourselves in the other person's experience. The responsibility of witnessing. Once you've truly heard someone, really heard them, you can't unhear it. You become a keeper of their truth, a witness to their vulnerability. This carries ethical weight. People will share more with you, trust you with deeper secrets, rely on you for the kind of presence that seems increasingly rare. Some people become overwhelmed by this responsibility. They start avoiding deep conversations because they don't want to be burdened with others' pain. But the alternative, returning to superficial interaction, often feels empty once you've tasted real connection. The key is learning healthy boundaries while maintaining an open heart. You can witness someone's pain without taking responsibility for fixing it. You can hold space for their struggle without making it your own. The limits of understanding. Despite our best efforts, we cannot fully understand another person's experience. The gap between subjective realities is sometimes unbridgeable. Cultural differences, trauma histories, neurodivergence, and simple human complexity mean that even our most empathic listening has limits. This limitation can be humbling and frustrating. You might listen deeply to someone and still completely miss what they most need you to understand. They might feel unheard despite your best efforts. Sometimes the kindest thing you can say is, "I'm trying to understand, but I realize I might be missing something important. Help me see this through your eyes." The boundary challenge. As you become known as someone who truly listens, people will seek you out. This is both gift and burden. Your calendar fills with friends who need to process their struggles. Family members start calling you when they're in crisis. Colleagues begin treating you as an unofficial counselor. While it's meaningful to be trusted with others' inner worlds, it can become overwhelming. You might find yourself drained from constant emotional labor, resentful of always being the listener while rarely being listened to yourself. Learning to say, "I care about you and I'm not available to listen right now," is crucial for sustainability. You can't pour from an empty cup, and maintaining your own emotional well-being isn't selfish. It's necessary for being genuinely present when you do choose to listen. The grief of recognition. Perhaps the deepest shadow of developing listening skills is recognizing how much was missing in your past relationships. You begin to see how often you weren't truly heard by important people in your life, and how often you failed to truly hear them. This can bring grief for lost opportunities, regret for conversations that went sideways, sadness for relationships that might have been deeper if both people had known how to listen. You might feel anger at a culture that never taught these skills, that values speaking over listening,
that mistakes noise for connection. This grief is part of the growth process. It's the price of awareness, the cost of developing capacities you didn't know you were missing. The antidote isn't to become bitter about the past, but to commit to showing up differently in future relationships.
The ripple effects of being heard. When we understand listening as a transformative practice rather than a passive activity, its effects extend far beyond individual conversations. Being truly heard creates changes that ripple through every aspect of human life. In intimate relationships, research consistently shows that feeling heard is a stronger predictor of relationship satisfaction than compatibility, shared interests, or even physical attraction. Couples who create space for each other's full experience, without immediately trying to change, fix, or debate it, report deeper intimacy and greater resilience during difficult periods. Consider the difference between these two responses to a partner saying, "I'm feeling disconnected from you lately." Response A: "That's not fair. We spent all weekend together. What about that nice dinner I made Tuesday?" Response B: "Tell me more about that feeling of disconnection. When do you notice it most?" Response A defends against the partner's experience, making it about the listener's efforts rather than the speaker's inner world. Response B creates space for understanding, inviting deeper intimacy even around difficult topics. Dr. Sue Johnson, creator of emotionally focused therapy, has shown that relationships heal not through conflict resolution, but through emotional accessibility and responsiveness. When both partners feel their emotional reality is received and valued, they can navigate almost any external challenge. In parenting, children whose parents practice deep listening develop what attachment researchers call secure base behavior, confidence that their inner world matters, that their emotions make sense, that they can trust important adults with their authentic selves. This isn't about being permissive or agreeing with everything children say. It's about helping them feel understood before attempting to guide or correct them. A child who feels heard is more likely to internalize family values, cooperate with necessary limits, and develop healthy emotional regulation. Conversely, children who grow up feeling unheard often develop what psychologists call false self-presentation. They learn to perform emotions and behaviors that get positive attention while hiding their authentic experience. This adaptation, while protective in childhood, often creates difficulties in adult relationships. In leadership and organizations, teams led by people who practice deep listening consistently outperform those led by charismatic speakers or decisive action takers. When team members feel their perspectives are genuinely considered, several powerful things happen. They offer more creative solutions because they're not worried about being dismissed. They take greater ownership of team decisions because they've been part of the process. They're more willing to raise concerns early before they become major problems. Google's massive study of team effectiveness found that psychological safety, fundamentally about feeling heard and valued, was the strongest predictor of high performance. Teams with psychological safety took more risks, learned faster from failures, and innovated more consistently. In healthcare, patients whose doctors practice active listening report better health outcomes, even when the medical treatment is identical. This isn't just about patient satisfaction, it's about the healing that happens when someone feels truly seen in their suffering. Research shows that feeling heard reduces stress hormones, which strengthens immune function and improves the body's ability to heal. When patients trust that their doctor understands their experience, they're more likely to follow treatment recommendations and more honest about symptoms that might be embarrassing or concerning. In conflict resolution,
Whether in personal relationships, workplace disputes, or even international diplomacy, the path to resolution almost always passes through a phase where each party feels their position has been truly understood by the other side. This doesn't require agreement. Someone can understand your perspective while maintaining a different viewpoint. But the act of feeling heard often diffuses the emotional reactivity that keeps conflicts escalating. When people feel understood, they become less defensive and more creative about finding mutually acceptable solutions. Restorative justice programs, which bring crime victims and perpetrators together in facilitated dialogues, consistently show better outcomes than traditional punishment-based approaches. The key is creating space where all parties feel their experience is fully received before moving toward resolution.
In community building, communities that practice collective listening through town halls, community circles, or other forums where diverse voices are truly heard, develop greater social cohesion and more effective decision-making processes. When people feel their concerns and perspectives are genuinely considered, they're more willing to support decisions they might not have initially preferred. The process of being heard often matters more than getting one's way. A different ending. Return to the teenager. Mom, I don't think I'm okay. This time, something different happens. The mother feels that familiar surge of fear. Her heart races, her mind begins generating explanations and solutions. But instead of acting on these impulses, she takes a breath. She notices her own terror without letting it drive her response. She looks at her child, really looks. She sees the trembling hands, the hollow expression, the weight they're carrying in their young shoulders. Instead of rushing to fix, she moves closer and says softly, "Tell me more about that." Her child's eyes widen slightly, surprised by the invitation rather than deflection. They take a shaky breath. Everything feels heavy, like there's this weight on my chest all the time. I can't remember the last time I felt actually happy about anything. Sometimes I lie awake, wondering if anyone would really care if I just disappeared. The mother's instinct is still to reassure, to say, "Of course we'd care." But she catches herself. She notices her own discomfort with her child's pain without trying to eliminate it immediately. "That sounds incredibly lonely," she says. Having those thoughts and not knowing if anyone would understand. Her teenager's eyes fill with tears, not the shut-down tears of frustration, but the relieving tears of being seen. "Yeah, it is lonely. I've been carrying this by myself for months." They talk for another hour. The mother doesn't offer solutions or try to cheer her child up. She asks questions. "When did you first notice feeling this way? What does a heavy day look like compared to a lighter one? Are there moments when the weight lifts, even briefly?" She listens to the answers without immediately trying to build upon them or redirect them toward hope. She simply receives her child's reality as it is. By the end of the conversation, nothing has been solved in the traditional sense. The teenager still struggles with depression. The mother still feels afraid and somewhat helpless. But something profound has shifted. The teenager is no longer alone with their pain. "I'm glad you told me," the mother says as they prepare to part. "This must have taken a lot of courage. I want you to know that you don't have to carry this by yourself anymore." 2 weeks later, they're sitting in a therapist's office together. But the healing began in that first moment of being truly heard.
When the teenager discovered that their inner world could be shared without being immediately fixed, judged, or minimized. That's what listening does. It doesn't solve everything, but it creates the conditions where healing becomes possible.
The sacred act of presence. Carl Rogers spent decades discovering what indigenous cultures have always known. Healing begins when someone feels fully received. He called it unconditional, positive regard, the radical act of accepting another person's reality without immediately trying to change it. This doesn't mean approving of everything someone says or does. It means creating space for their full human experience, the contradictions, the messiness, the parts that don't make logical sense. It's what Martin Buber meant when he distinguished between I-it and I-thou relationships. The difference between treating someone as an object to be understood or fixed and encountering them as a complete being deserving of presence. Simone Weil, the French philosopher and mystic, wrote that attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. She understood that giving someone your complete attention is not just being nice, it's an act of love that requires sacrifice. You sacrifice your own agenda, your need to be right, your discomfort with silence and uncertainty. Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh called this quality of attention deep listening to relieve suffering. He taught that when we listen without judgment, without trying to fix or change anything, we create conditions that allow natural healing to occur. The listener becomes what he called a bodhisattva of compassion, someone whose very presence reduces suffering in the world. The African philosophy of Ubuntu reminds us that our humanity is interdependent. I am because we are. In this understanding, listening becomes more than a communication skill. It's how we create each other, how we call forth the fullness of each other's humanity. Rumi, writing from the Sufi tradition, captured this beautifully. The quieter you become, the more you are able to hear. But he wasn't just talking about hearing words. He meant the capacity to receive the essence of another being, to listen with what he called the ear of the heart. All of these wisdom traditions point to the same revolutionary insight. Presence is transformative. When someone feels truly seen and heard, they don't just feel better, they become more themselves. They access capacities for healing, creativity, and resilience that isolation had hidden. The choice before us. We live in an age of unprecedented communication technology and epidemic loneliness. We can video chat with someone on the other side of the planet while remaining strangers to the people sleeping in our own homes. We have more ways to connect and less experience of true connection. The solution isn't abandoning technology or retreating from modern life. It's recovering an ancient human capacity that our current culture has nearly forgotten. The ability to be fully present with another person's experience. This isn't just about being a better friend, partner, or parent, though it will transform all those relationships. It's about recognizing that in a world fragmenting into isolated bubbles of experience, the ability to truly receive another person's reality becomes a form of social healing. Every time you put down your phone to really listen to your child, you're modeling presence in a distracted world. Every time you ask a follow-up question instead of offering advice, you're creating space for someone's authentic self to emerge. Every time you sit with someone's difficult emotion without trying to fix it, you're demonstrating that their inner world has value. These moments matter more than we realize. In a culture that treats people as problems to be solved, information to be processed, or resources to be optimized. The simple act of receiving someone as a complete human being is revolutionary. Your listening ear becomes sanctuary in a noisy world. Your presence becomes refuge for people who have forgotten what it feels like to be truly seen. Your attention becomes love in its most practical form. So, in your next difficult conversation, try this. Put the phone down. Turn your body toward the person speaking. Look into their eyes, not to judge or analyze, but to see. Ask one genuine follow-up question. Let silence breathe between you. Notice what happens, not just for them, but for you. Notice how the quality of connection changes when you show up not as an advisor or fixer, but as a witness to their full humanity. Because when you listen not to reply but to receive, when you offer attention instead of solutions, when you trust that being heard is itself healing, you offer something rare in our hurried world, the experience of mattering. Your listening ear is a sanctuary. Your presence is a revolution. Your attention is love in action. And in a world that has forgotten how to listen, this might be the most important gift you can give.